Hi everyone, my name's Diabudar, and today I'm going to tell you everything you need to know about using magic in Elden Ring. Magic in this game is cool as hell, and it lets you do all different sorts of cool stuff, but the problem is that the game doesn't do anything to actually teach you how to use it. Now, I don't mean like in terms of how you actually play the game with it, I mean like physically, what do you have to do in order to cast a magic spell in Elden Ring? So today, I'm going to teach you not only the basics of actually using magic, but I'm also going to go over some of the more advanced stuff to think about when you're making your character. If you find this helpful, please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. First, we're going to go over the very most basic mechanics of actually using spells in Elden Ring. There are two major categories of spells in this game. If you go into your inventory, you'll see that you have a tab for sorceries, and right next to it you also have a tab for incantations. And these are the two different kinds of spells that you can cast with two different kinds of catalysts. A lot of people mistakenly believe that sorceries are all about using intelligence and incantations are all about using faith. And for the most part, that's kind of a good rule of thumb, but it's not 100% true. For example, you can see these lava sorceries require intelligence in addition to faith in order to cast, or these thorn sorceries don't require intelligence at all, they're just pure faith in order to be able to cast them. And there's even a couple sorceries that require arcane to cast in addition to intelligence, such as these bubble sorceries. Similarly, most incantations require faith to cast, but not all of them. Some of them require faith and intelligence, like these Golden Order fundamentalist ones. Some of them require just intelligence, such as Law of Regression and Law of Causality, as you can see here. And there's also, of course, the ones that require arcane, such as the Dragon Communion spells and the Blood spells. So the type of spell doesn't necessarily determine what stats you should have to cast it. All that the type of spell determines is what catalyst you're going to use to cast it. There are two types of catalyst in Elden Ring. If you go to your inventory or your chest, you can find them under the ranged weapons / catalyst tab. If you scroll down underneath all the bows and stuff, you'll find that there are glintstone staffs and sacred seals. So glintstone staffs, as you can see here, it's called the Academy Glintstone Staff, and right underneath it, it says glintstone staff. That's the type of weapon it is, that's its class. You use staffs to cast sorceries, and you can use sacred seals, again, gravelstone seal. Right underneath it, it says Sacred Seal, that's the class of weapon it is. You use Sacred Seals to cast incantations. As you can see, there's a lot of different catalysts in this game, and we'll talk about the differences between each individual staff and seal in a later part of this video. But for now, we're sticking with the fundamentals. So once you have a catalyst for the type of spell you want to cast, you then need to go to the Memorize Spell menu at any site of grace and select your spells. So you can see here, there's a bunch of different categories for your spells. There's a tab that lists all of them, and then there's tabs for offensive sorceries, support sorceries, offensive incantations, and support incantations. So you can sit at any site of grace and go to the Memorize Spell menu to equip the spells that you want. You have a limited number of memory slots, and you can increase that amount by finding memory stones throughout the world. You can Google where those are. I'm not going over that in this video right now because that'll take forever. Once you've got your spells memorized, you're going to need a catalyst in order to cast them. If you go to your equipment screen, you can select a weapon slot and equip a catalyst into it like any other weapon. You may have to scroll down. A lot of people don't realize that they need to scroll down to near the bottom of the page because the catalysts are all towards the bottom. So if you have a lot of weapons, you're going to have to scroll down to see the catalyst. So in this case, I'm equipping both a staff and a seal. Now, if you look on the bottom left of your screen, you can see in the top slot the spell that you have active currently. You can swap between spells by pressing either D-pad up on a controller or the up arrow key on a keyboard by default. And then you can press the attack button for the hand that your catalyst is in order to cast spells. So here I have it in my left hand, for example, so if I press the block button, which on a controller would be L1 and on a keyboard and mouse would be right click, that will cast with my left hand because the staff is in my left hand. And you can also have a weapon in your right hand, of course, or you can do it the other way around, or you can have a staff and a shield, or whatever you want. Now, when I switch over to my incantation, which in this case is Flame Sling, you'll see that I can't cast it using my staff. This guy just does his animation where he scratches his head. It's kind of silly. I need to use a Sacred Seal in order to cast this incantation. So I switched over to the finger seal in my right hand, and now I can cast Flame Sling by attacking using the seal. So again, that's R1 since it's in my right hand, or left click if I was on a keyboard and mouse. And then I put it in my left hand, and you can see I can cast it using my block button, and then I can attack with my dagger or whatever and cast my Ashes of War, and so that's how you use your spells. Now we're going to talk about some more advanced stuff that you should know if you're planning on making a build that involves using magic. For starters, it's important to know what the stats on your catalysts mean. So if you look at your catalysts, you'll see that you've got 4 main sections here. There's attack power, damage negation, attribute scaling, and the attributes that are required in order to use the staff. So for attack power, the only one that matters there is sorcery scaling. You see, like, my staff has some physical damage, other staffs might do a little bit of magic damage or fire damage. That's when you hit R2, or your heavy attack button, to do like a bonk with the staff. This is terrible. It's worthless. There is no reason why you should ever hit something with a staff, ever. You should always have some kind of actual melee weapon in order to complement your staff, in case you need to hit something at melee range for whatever reason. Anyway, so the guarded damage negation has to do with using the staff to block, and you're never going to do that either, so that number also doesn't matter. Attributes required obviously tells you what stats you need in order to be able to wield the catalyst and use it effectively. If you don't meet the stats required or the attributes required to use the catalyst, then your sorcery scaling, or in the case of a seal, your incant scaling, will be stuck at 60, as you can see here under attack power right now. So you always want to make sure that you're using a staff or seal that you actually have the stat requirements for. This is a mistake that I see a lot of new players make, because it's possible to meet the spell that you want to cast. It has requirements separate from the catalyst. So it's possible to meet the spell's requirements, but not the catalyst requirements. So if you find yourself casting a spell and it's doing like no damage at all, then it's because you need the stats to use your catalyst, or you need to get a different catalyst that you have the stats for. Also, you can see here, if you look under attribute scaling, this Gelmir Glintstone staff scales with intelligence and faith. So like I said, just because you're casting sorceries using a staff doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use intelligence to cast it. There are ways for a high faith character to cast a lot of sorceries, there are ways for a high intelligence character to cast a lot of incantations. So for example, this Golden Order seal gets intelligence scaling in addition to faith scaling, so if you were an int faith character or just a high intelligence character with a bit of faith, then that would be the one you want to use. This Clawmark seal scales with strength, so if you're a strength build, then that's the one you want to use. And of course the Dragon Communion seal scales with arcane. Interestingly, the scaling letters also lie. You see this has a B in arcane and a D in faith. The scaling values are actually the same for both of those stats. So don't take the scaling letters at face value, because it's a bit more complicated than it needs to be, because it's a From Software game. Also, like I mentioned a minute ago, spells have different requirements that are separate from the catalyst requirements, and the spell's attribute requirement does not determine what stats it scales with. That's based entirely on the catalyst that you're using to cast it. So for example, even though this spell has no faith requirement, if I was a high faith character, then I could use a faith scaling staff, like the Gelmir staff, to cast it, and I'd get better damage than I would with an intelligence scaling staff. So when it comes to choosing a catalyst, you want the one that gives you the highest incant scaling or sorcery scaling. When you cast an attack spell, like, Glintstone Pebble or Flame Sling or whatever, that spell has a multiplier that is multiplied by your incant scaling to determine how much damage the spell does. So it doesn't matter what stats the spell itself requires, it just matters what your incant scaling or sorcery scaling is on the catalyst that you're using to cast it. The best way to increase that catalyst scaling is by leveling up the catalyst, same as any other weapon. Most of your damage comes from weapon upgrades, and then once you've got your weapon to a decent upgrade level, then you can worry about leveling up your damage stats to make it scale better. Also, on the topic of upgrades, I want to say specifically, the Meteorite staff is a staff that a lot of people get because it's good in the early game. This is the one weapon in the game that cannot be upgraded. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's a switch view button, and if you look at the description of the Meteorite staff, it says, however, this staff cannot be strengthened in any way. So if you're using the Meteorite staff, you can't upgrade it. It's equivalent to about a plus 12 or 13 like other staff, so once you have the smithing stones for that, then you want to switch over to something like the Academy Glintstone staff, or, just any staff based on your stats. So now let's talk about how to get more spells. So when it comes to getting incantations, the easiest way to do that is to come and talk to Corin in the Round Table Hold. He sells a bunch of basic incantations that are actually really useful throughout pretty much your entire game. The buffs are, and the Catch Flame are at least. If you want to get more incantations, then you need to find prayer books, which you can get in different spots throughout the world. For example, this lone Lanedell Knight in Liurnia, which isn't Lanedell, no one knows why he's here. Anyway, this guy drops the Dragon Cult prayer book, and there are plenty of other places where you can find several other prayer books throughout the game that'll each give you spells. You can bring that over to Corrin, and once you give it to him, he'll whine about it because he's Corrin, but then once you go to study incantations, that'll add those spells to his shop inventory, and so now you can purchase the spells of that prayer book from Corrin. There are other ways to find spells throughout the world too. For example, there are incantation scarabs that drop spells, like this one that dropped Frenzied Burst. Some spells are rewards for killing bosses, some spells are found in chests in dungeons. There are also merchants that sell sorceries, of course, so the most prominent one is Sellen at the Waypoint Ruins in Limgrave. So from the Gatefront Ruins, just follow the road east, and then once you go over the bridge, follow the road a little bit to the south, and you'll come to the Waypoint Ruins. You'll be able to see here, right over there, there's the bridge, and of course there's the caravan next to it, so it shouldn't be hard to find these ruins. Find the cellar in the ruins, and there's a boss here. It's just a Mad Pumpkinhead, so it shouldn't be too hard to kill. Get behind him, because you can't hurt his head. It has like 90% damage resistance. But anyway, once he's dead, grab the Site of Grace, go through the door, and you'll find Sellen, and you can talk to her. You'll have to tell her twice that you want to learn sorcery from her. So tell her you want to learn. And then, of course, you can study sorcery, and you can buy a bunch of basic sorceries from her, some of which, like Scholar's Armament and Scholar's Shield, are actually still really good throughout your entire playthrough. And of course, just like the prayer books, there are scrolls that you can find throughout the world, and these you can give to Sellen, and once you give them to her, she will add them to her shop inventory. Now, you might be asking yourself, Diabetor, what if Sellen dies or something? Or what if I attacked her for some reason, and she disappears, and now she's mad at me and doesn't want to talk to me? How can I use scrolls and buy spells if I have done that? You're in luck, because the developers knew that they have fucking psychopaths playing this game, and so if you go over to the Church of Vows in East Liurnia, you can see here it's on this plateau just to the east of Ryuthakari Academy, you'll find the Turtle Pope, Miriel, and if you talk to him, not only does he have a couple spells that he'll sell you, both sorceries and incantations, but he will also accept prayer books and scrolls. So you see here I have the option to give him the Royal House Scroll, and like the other two, once you give them to him, he will add them to his shop inventory and sell them to you. Now, Corrin and Sellen both have quests where they might become unavailable for a time, so if you kill Miriel, then that's it. You won't be able to use scrolls or prayer books, so don't kill him. And while we're here, I just want to mention you can receive absolution here at the Church of Vows. You'll need a Celestial Dew item in order to do it, but it'll tell you that your sins are absolved, and that'll make any NPCs that are mad at you calm down. So if you hit an NPC and they start attacking you, or if you piss off an NPC and they disappear like Sellen did, then you can use absolution to make them calm down or come back, and you can talk to them. Absolution does not revive dead NPCs, so if you watch them die, if you kill them, that's it. They're gone. So don't think that you can use Absolution to revive dead NPCs, because it doesn't do that. In the previous section, I said that when it comes to choosing a catalyst for your build, you want to choose the one that gives you the highest sorcery scaling or incant scaling, which from now on I'm going to refer to as catalyst scaling, just to keep this a bit simpler. So every staff or seal has a base catalyst scaling, and then that is added to based on the upgrade level of the staff or seal, and also based on your stats and how they contribute to your attribute scaling. So for example, this Dragon Communion Seal, it has arcane scaling, so as I level up my arcane stat, that'll increase the incant scaling of the Dragon Communion Seal, and thus my spells will do more damage because I have increased the incant scaling. And so that applies to any spell regardless of its stat requirements. I'm repeating this from the last section, but I want to make it clear because a lot of people get confused about this. Just because the spell requires intelligence or faith or whatever to cast doesn't necessarily mean that leveling up that stat will make that spell do more damage. It's entirely based on the catalyst scaling of the catalyst that you're using to cast the spell. Now, there are exceptions to this because this is a From Software game, and so nothing can be simple. So the first exception is for spells that add a buff to your character. This is spells like Golden Vow, Flame Grant Me Strength, Magic Fortification, Blessings Boon, Protection of the Erd Tree. These spells add an effect to your character such as buffing your damage done or reducing the damage that you take, and these are not affected by your catalyst scaling at all. So for example, Flame Grant Me Strength is always a 20% increase to your fire damage and physical damage output. Same thing with like Terra Magica. The buff from that never gets stronger, it's always the same amount regardless of your catalyst scaling, and of course something like Cure Poison or whatever can only cure your poison once. It can't cure more poison beyond just being cured. Now we're going to talk about weapon buffs, and this is when things start to get really needlessly complicated. So for example, everyone considers Bloodflame Blade to be an arcane spell, right? Because it has an arcane requirement, it does bleed buildup, but the damage that it does only scales with the faith portion of the catalyst that you're using to cast it. So for example, I'm an 80 arcane character right now. I have a fully upgraded Dragon Communion Seal with 314 incant scaling, and casting Bloodflame Blade using that only added 43 fire damage to my dagger. Because Bloodflame Blade adds 40 bleed buildup, that never changes, the bleed buildup doesn't change with anything, but the fire damage scales with the faith portion of the seal that you used to cast it. So now we have a finger seal that scales best with faith, it's not upgraded at all, and you can see that it added 45 fire damage. So this completely unupgraded seal is adding more fire damage to the weapon than my fully upgraded arcane scaling seal. And that's because Bloodflame Blade is looking only at the faith portion of the catalyst scaling when it determines how much fire damage it's adding to the weapon. So you can see here, the spreadsheet shows that it adds fire damage to the weapon based on 0.4 times your spell buff, but only the faith portion of it. So you need an external tool, like this one that I'll have linked in the description. It's Nayasu's Build Planner, and this lets you see the different components that are adding to your catalyst scaling based on what the catalyst scales with. So in this case, my Dragon Communion Seal only gets 109 incant scaling from the faith portion of the attribute scaling. And that's because my character has high arcane, but only 15 faith, so it's not adding much to the faith portion of it. But since the finger seal has much higher faith scaling, because that's the primary stat that it scales with, even when it's not upgraded at 15 faith, it still gets higher incant scaling from faith than the Dragon Communion Seal does, because that one favors arcane. And this applies to all weapon buffs. So for example, I cast Electrify Armament using my Dragon Communion Seal, it added 81 lightning damage, versus using the Finger Seal. The Finger Seal adds 85 because it scales better with faith. This also applies to Scholar's Armament. This wants only the intelligence portion of your staff that you're using to cast it. So if you have a hybrid build and you're using a staff that gets like faith scaling or arcane scaling, Scholar's Armament only looks at the intelligence portion of the staff's scaling. And a similar thing also happens with healing spells. So you see I have 936 health right now. I'm going to cast Heal using my Dragon Communion Seal, which is fully upgraded and has 314 incant scaling. And it restored my health to 1186, so that healed 250 points of health. And as you can see, I have 314 incant scaling, versus if I cast it with the Finger Seal, so I had 1,186 health, now I have 1,447, so that's 261 health that it healed, even though the Finger Seal is not upgraded at all and has 1/3 of the incant scaling of the Dragon Communion Seal. And again, that's because when you're casting healing spells, it only looks at the faith portion of the catalyst when it determines how strong the heal should be. So even if you're a Faith Arcane build, or, a Faith Intelligence build or something like that, if you're using weapon buffs or healing spells, then you want to cast those specific spells using a seal like the Godslayer Seal, the Finger Seal, or the Erdtree Seal, because those are the ones that have the highest faith scaling, which will make your weapon buffs and stuff more effective. So even if you're a bleed build, if you want to put Bloodflame Blade on your weapon, then switch to one of those seals, cast it, and then switch back to the Dragon Communion Seal for your damage spells. Anyway, that concludes this video. Lots of people get into the game and they want to use magic, and they don't know how to do it, so I figured I'd make this to make explaining it to them a lot easier, instead of typing out an essay in the Elden Ring Discord server or whatever, every time someone asks how they cast Comet Azure or whatever. Anyway, if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments below, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability. If you found this helpful, please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing, because it really helps me out. My name is Diabetor, and I will catch you later.